All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming to the embedded SIG meeting. I think we can keep it short and sweet based on the number of attendees, but it would be good to log this, group of people's thoughts on some of the specifications for the WASI LTS that are kind of percolating in the background. Um, so hopefully everybody can see that document in chat. I will share my screen so we can kind of walk through those together. Oh, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Was anybody at the last embedded SIG meeting? It was a rough time zone for folks in the Americas, but um, anybody here from like located in Asia? Guess not.
Which meeting
Oh,
you were mentioned,
oh.
the meeting with European or meeting with the US?
The last meeting with Europe.
Last meeting with Europe, no, I think it's just kind of like today, and the first 10 minutes, nobody there, so people leaves, and then maybe it just started, and we don't know that. So, sorry, I missed the meeting.
No worries, no worries. Um, that's a good note. Um, but okay, then let me just share my screen and we can kind of go through. Um, just give me one sec. Let's delete a couple of things first before I share this. All right. Okay. So this is the brainstorm list that's been kind of floating around in terms of LTS. And for just a little bit of context, this is in, um, you know, the embedded context. We're interested in understanding what it means to have an LTS that you can actually or an LTS for WASI that you could actually push out to embedded devices to become part of the firmware that need to last N years. And that's part of one of the things we're going to discuss today. It's like, what does N mean to everybody? Um, because we need to start nailing down these parameters in order to understand, how much this would cost, if what the shape of it needs to be in order to make it feasible. So I can review from last time, like some of the notes of those folks. Let's see if I can find them quickly enough. Here we go. So the pull request from last time. So this is that meeting between Europe and Asia. So it's basically, in starting to look at this, looks like we're getting, in terms of LTS here, means something that's supported for between 7 and 10 years. We can kind of go around the room and see what, long-term support means to us. And then there's questions about which platforms to be considered. Um, that it looks like they didn't go into too much detail, but just started kind of voicing more questions. Um, what exactly is the scope there? In terms of chips, architectures, capabilities, all of that. Also looks like, as far as which runtimes to support, leaning towards WAMR, maybe WASM to C. That's definitely an open point for discussion. Um, and I think they basically added a couple more points here that ended up over here as well. So I think my plan would be to kind of quickly work through this, see if we can more collect everybody's opinions. And if we get into any interesting discussion points, we can go from there. So I think I like the idea of getting everybody's thoughts on the duration of an LTS release. Like, what does that mean to everybody here based on, your deployment contexts? Pete, any thoughts?
Hey, my name is Pete. I talked with Chris a bit, like month and a half ago or so.
Oh, great.
I'm
Okay.
very new to the WebAssembly space. I'm from Woven by Toyota, and yeah, just trying to kind of get my sea legs under me,
Awesome.
understand the domain a bit more. Um, yeah, so What does long-term mean? Well, it's pretty typical, I guess, in automotive for a cycle to be somewhere between like 3 to 5 years between like updating a new platform, like having a new release of like major electronics control units. So somewhere between 3 to 5 years is pretty typical, I guess. Things are speeding up with all this over-the-air update stuff and like with, okay, we have to compete globally. It's, but I'd say it's typical.
No, yeah. I guess the question, of course, is like it's 3 to 5 years, yes. But depending on where that's how deep in the car that is, like obviously that's the cycle you operate on, but that's not, I guess I've
Yeah,
definitely
not
maybe this
not
is
not
oh yeah.
Yeah, not all software is getting updated every 3 to 5 years. So like deeply embedded devices, things which are highly safety critical. I mean, the the assessment process, is pretty in depth. So try not to update those things unless there's some sort of critical vulnerability or some issue that's discovered. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
really.
Full disclosure. I realized I didn't have my name on there. My name's Emily. I work for Bosch. So
Oh,
we have
okay.
this discussion all the time of like where is sure like yes, the software, depending on where it's running, needs to be updated, or rather is kind of obsolete in 3 to 5 years, if you will. But how long do you actually need to support it when, if it's a critical piece of your car can't stop working in 5 years.
Right, right, right.
And this,
Yeah,
no, I think parts of that
That's
are
that's very
academic,
true.
frankly.
That's
But
that's really true. Yeah, absolutely. So like, okay, every 3 to 5 years we're going to be updating platforms, but then like, people don't like to throw their cars away after only owning them for a few years. So then you've got maybe 10, 15 years beyond that, depending on
yeah,
the life cycle that's reasonable to be expected of the vehicle. So
yeah. But no, I mean, I'm really glad you threw out a number because that's the place to start. And we can talk about what it means to have, long-term support on something deeply embedded in a vehicle. Is that a practical conversation to have for WebAssembly? The very frank answer may be no. So I could, saying you need 15-year support on software is a tall order. Nice. Um, um, any other thoughts? Okay. Um, let's see. All right. So we've got, okay. I'll have to do a better job of teasing out notes here. Um, So it looks like I said from last time, they also discussed this. So the next question I was going to go to is there a list of platforms, OSs, architectures that'll be supported? We'll likely have to limit this in some way with the note here that Stephen from Adam suggested a tiered system, basically, where you have a class of devices, OSs, et cetera, that are well supported, and tier two is best effort. So I could definitely see that. Um, I think it's a question of like what would be the platforms and OSs that are kind of, the first class citizens here. My instinct would be frankly something on the like Raspberry Pi sized devices, just off the top of my head, but it can boil down to what use cases folks are envisioning.
Here I have something I want to say, and based on our experience, here we might want to uh, add something more here, and let's call it a development environment and execution environment. This is basically the Walmart team usually to only think the always people, everybody in the world, maybe they should use Ubuntu, at least the Mac OS, to be their developing environment. So the most of the test and compatible test is running on these two platforms. But suddenly this year we met a lot of developers working with their Windows OS. So we are totally we totally don't break. We never thought about that. And the worst case is nobody in our team has any Windows experience. So it's
No.
make us a lot of problems there. So I think, and then now the Mac OS, and as the 13 and 14, they are totally based on different chipset, right? After 14, there is only ARM chipset, but before 14, there are Intel chipset, something like that. And usually this is not quite important for the final product, but usually before the people doing landing or making their decision on the product, they usually do some demos or investigations on those platforms. So if you don't have a very stable or firm the quality or development, the experience, the people usually don't want to go further to land to their real product. So I think maybe the development should also be considered here. I mean, it's tier one, which platform you should use, and tier two, which platform that might have problems, or tier three is, okay, hope you are lucky, something like that. But it's the product platform, I think we are hoping this is development, and if there are the execution platform, like we are hoping the Zephyr or some Zephyr and the NetX, this two is the this two platform are widely used in China. At least the two our customers are using that. The biggest platform, the biggest customer are using that, Zephyr and NetX. Yeah, something like that. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Awesome. That's a really, really good point about the development environment. Um, I've only ever you're talking about like all of the Whammer development, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only ever used Whammer on Mac OS and it works great. Um, I hope you got the Windows thing figured out. Um, that is so I guess just not to push too hard and not to like have you, give up more information about your customers than you're comfortable with, but um was I guess was things not should we how I'm trying to gauge basically for the purposes of the notes. Should Windows be a tier one? And this can just be your opinion. This is obviously all going to get hashed out later. But you know, does it have a big potential value to this like WASI LTS? Or are there enough customers who are relying on Windows that it could, make or break,
Because
support for this?
if we are following the same release model with the WASI SDK, eventually you will provide the two-chain, right? The two-chain
Sure.
package. Yeah. And then you will be asked if I can install this two-chain package on my machine. Then it will
Mhm.
be Ubuntu. Ubuntu. This is Linux. This is the most easiest thing. And you
Mhm.
just and then the Mac. The problem is, does it support my Mac with the Intel chipset, or does it support my Mac with the ARM chipset? And then on Windows, the problem will change to if I'm using the MSVC, if I can install it, or I have to install some MinGW, something like that. That's all the problem. Because now I say, oh, no that thing, no such thing. Yeah, I think it will be kindly bother the final distribution form, or yeah, how we're going to release this WASI SDK. No, WASI LTS.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to get a feel for like basically what percentage of folks are interested in doing this on Windows. Um, or maybe not percentage, maybe raw number. Um, is it worth like pushing towards it being tier one? Not a question we need to answer today. I think I've just in past meetings, there's been a resistance to prioritizing Windows because it's a pain. We know how to do this easily on Linux, and that's what we want to do. So I think I'm wondering if we need to shift our mindset on that a little bit.
Actually, that's the problem. I can't give the answer because, like I said, me and my team, the whole of my team doesn't have any experience on Windows development. So
Okay.
Totally no idea.
Because I mean, I'm from, on the Bosch side of this, from any number of systems in factories in the automotive world,
Mhm.
rely on Windows, full stop. And everybody uses Windows for their, for the development, for running the machines. Um, and so yeah, it is certainly an industry standard.
Okay, sorry, just one more question. In Bash, if you said you are totally based on the Windows, but there is also WSL, are you going to develop
So
WSL too, or based on the MSVC?
so it's kind of it depends. Bosch is a big enough company that it's almost several companies in one. In the So for like manufacturing, there's any number of lines that are still running Windows 11. Um, or sorry, Windows XP. I shouldn't make fun of Windows 11. Um, and so hence, the cyber physical systems in that context are running Windows XP. And the people supporting them are using, a modern distro of Windows, but it's all Windows. And some of the savvier ones are using WSL2, and the less other folks with other tool chains are using MSVC. So you really got a little bit of everything.
Okay, good to know. And
But,
I don't know how to say
um,
it.
cool. Okay, I'm glad. Very it's definitely something to consider, particularly for the demo stage, because yeah, it can be really off-putting. Um, if you try, you're sent to assess something and you try to open it up and it just doesn't work. Um, awesome. Okay. As far as execution platforms, Zephyr and NetX are also great things to bring up here. Um, Zephyr, I've definitely run Whammer on Zephyr. Um, there's certainly other platforms we need to be considering here, but from an RTOS perspective, I think these are the two big ones. Um, okay. All right. I would also be in favor of starting to look back at, we had in the embedded SIG, we had created a document basically defining what it meant for a device to be embedded, and what kind of requirements it would have. So those were all pretty well articulated in a prior document. I'd be for just pulling in some of those specs to see if they hold up to the WASI LTS as well. There are obviously different problems, but I think the original, like, which platforms are we considering document did a good job of, kind of setting the minimum hardware requirements, I would say. All right. Um, so maybe we can go down to this next question, which is what needs to be put in place for this LTS to be usable? The notes that we have here are already, you know, are there contributor agreements or licenses that we need? Um, what coding standards should we be thinking about? What builds, testing, validation? How are we handling security vulnerabilities? Community best practices? All of these questions. Um, so let me see. I guess the first and foremost is, does anybody see anything that's clearly missing from this list? Like an ingredient that's usually part of a productive open source community that is missing. All right, all right. Um, Let me cheat and look back at that meeting from the other day to see if they had anything there. All right, not really. Okay. They have a good point here um, about determining non-functional requirements. So let me go back to this. see. I think I will cheat and add that. Because that is something that would be important to understand. It's what, you know, do people have timing and jitter requirements? Do they have memory usage requirements? Like where do they have even, documentation requirements in order to be able to continue to use the software that all exists? Fill some of that in later. Let's see. Um, One thing that I do think I have no intention of dragging out this meeting, but I think it could be interesting to try to take a crack at um, this kind of question. Is principles on addressing problems something we can use to resolve conflicts slash make decisions slash priorities? And I'm boiling this down to what values could the WASI LTS have? Like, what is its primary goal? Is it stability? It's yeah, is it stability? Is it lean memory footprint? Like what could be the kind of the defining characteristics that you would use in order to down the line resolve conflicts as they come up? Like what's the highest value set that you're moving towards? Um,
So one of the things I was curious about is so when we talk about the LTS, I think that, I mean, stability seems like it's a strong thing to shoot for. I'm wondering also if there's consideration around how to sort of maintain some compatibility, maybe like, or compatibility might be the wrong word, but like for any, I don't know how to put it, like any extensions or any kind of like updates or things that we think are necessary for like an embedded context. If there's a way to sort of keep those aligned with like what's going on and like the future things as well related to WASI, because there's like WASI P2, WASI P3 is like not released yet. It's a preview of a preview. So like how do we ensure that there's some level of compatibility there, or like anything that we need to add to the LTS that might not exist yet within the WASI standard? How do we ensure that like there's still a level of compatibility between and interoperability?
yeah. Um, no, that's a huge problem. And real quick, so is your goal to be able to like reuse a binary from, WASI P2 to the WASI LTS or LTS to P2? Like what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I'm thinking like the second one that you'd mentioned, so like the LTS to P2, and ensuring that like if say in the LTS we need to have some additional functionality that's like added, maybe like we have a lot of embedded folks that say need X feature or something, ensuring that that X feature is also available should like we want to pull that software out of the embedded context, out of the LTS, and sort of run it in a runtime that's not like contained within the LTS quite yet.
Okay, okay.
And this is again a very new space for me, so I may say some
Yeah, yeah.
ignorant things. So I apologize if that's the case.
No, all good. I'm trying to think through. There's obviously stuff that is specific to the embedded system, like to an embedded system. So much of, I think some of the challenge has been actually stripping stuff out of WASI and understanding, okay, what can we boil down to be stable and reusable and kind of hit the minimum requirements for a more embedded context. Um, so thinking the other direction is actually kind of interesting. What would we, what might get added um, in the embedded context that you would end up just needing to have almost dummy interfaces for. Um, are you thinking about like for testing or for?
So it might be
Very bad.
yeah, it might be dummy interfaces or just so what I've seen happen in software is like one group thinks that something is helpful and useful and they'll implement it in something, and then some other group will say, oh, that does look useful, I want that too. And so I'm just imagining a case where maybe it's some performance related thing, I don't know, that's implemented in the LTS that's very particularly good for embedded. There may be like a use case for this, not an embedded as well. Maybe you want to be able to spin up, say, like a bunch of lightweight servers or something, on a server environment, that it could be useful there as well. So I'm just sort of thinking the other direction, I guess. There might be some features that we come up with in the LTS that are great to have outside of it as well.
Yeah. That is a very good question.
Feel like I diverted you from the value set question. Sorry for that.
Oh, that is fine. That is honestly, I mean, I think you're kind of getting to the point here that like, so here, I was going to put stability at the, like, top number one on the value set, but you're pointing out a really good thing that like compatibility, um, if not perfect compatibility, paths to compatibility, um, with whatever the state of the art WASI standard is at the time, are going to would be valuable. I think that's a really, really good point. So don't worry, it's all part of it. Um, any other thoughts?
So, I mean, I'm fairly new to open source. I've only been kind of doing stuff in the open source for about a year and a half, but I've seen there's different ways of doing things. Like, for example, in the Rust project, they have like their teams, and like one single person can like veto and block forward progress until there's sort of a way to convince that person or come to some middle ground. I've also seen in like IEEE, there's like a means of breaking ties and like escalating things. So I I don't have enough background to know like what would fit best in this setting with the folks that are contributing and working here. So I don't know, I'm just throwing a few things out that I know about.
Totally. Um, I put this, yeah, because there's multiple, yeah, the shape of all of those kind of, it will, affect what gets done and what kind of, improvements actually get pushed. So I don't really have I don't have a ton to add on that. Bytecode Alliance has been my primary like open source involvement. So I've seen how it's done here and that's about it. Uh,
If you don't mind me asking, how is it done within the Bytecode Alliance? I don't know, like 30 seconds. You don't have to go through the whole thing and bring out the scroll and
Mostly I've just seen it as votes and you'll kind of go through on different, and I guess I've seen it a couple of times in the WASI CG, that you'll have, a proposal will come through and everybody will vote on it and you can put up multiple kind of levels of, uh, I don't know, excitement about it. There's usually like a strongly agree, neutral, and then strongly disagree or disagree, strongly disagree. Luke, feel free to jump in and explain how this is actually done. Um, it's everything always seems to go through because we're pretty solidly in agreement eventually.
Yeah, well, there's the standards processes, which are all under the W3C, which is like the same group that does like HTML and CSS. And that follows one set of set of processes that involves the votes. But generally the W3C has like a kind of consensus model where it doesn't require unanimity, like one veto can't block everything. However, there's kind of the goal is that who's ever the chair people of the group or of the subgroup is striving to find consensus by trying to say like what like what sort of compromises like maximize consensus on a particular issue, but it doesn't require unanimity. And on some rare occasions, there have been WASM votes that went against someone who was in the negative. But for the most part, they tend to go unanimous or almost everyone on a thing. So that's how the standards go, and it's different than like say like JavaScript is a standards that's committee where a single dissenting vote that's officially in the group can block the whole thing. Now, to be in the group, you have to like pay a certain like 50K membership or whatever it is. But so it's not just any internet rando can show up and like have a dissenting vote. But still, though, a lot of things get blocked. But that's not the case for the WC. There's also an up escalation process where if you're an official member of the WC, you can formally object, and then it actually causes a higher up committee to be formed to like analyze and say like, oh, is things going off the rails? And that's never happened. But if for the WebAssembly, but it happens all the time in highly contentious HTML and CSS things, and also for all sorts of places. So that's all that's on the WC, distinct from the Bytecode Alliance, where you would say that WC makes standards and Bytecode Alliance makes open source implementations of open standards. And the Bytecode Alliance, I think, again, the goal is people just find consensus locally just by agreeing, and when everyone agrees, you just move forward. And then there's like kind of an RFC process that's used like in WASM time. That's a way of like getting an idea out there, because that's a fairly bigger project that has lots of things. But I think each particular project gets to do its own kind of you make up its own kind of consensus gathering thing. But if an issue I think were to get contentious, I think it goes to the TSC. There's this technical steering committee that has elected members by the Bytecode Alliance members, and then they would get to vote. And I think the TSC votes on certain official things like what projects get brought in officially to the Bytecode Alliance and what level of like, are they a core project or a like, forget the two levels of projects. But anyways, that group gets to vote on certain important things or on when technical issues get escalated. But I don't think anything's been technically escalated them yet thus far. So it's kind of like a backstop. It's probably way more than you wanted to know about that.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. Sorry for taking advantage of the fact that, there's not a lot of people here to ask a question like that. So
Of course.
thanks.
Yeah. Glad you're showing up and asking questions. So welcome.
Awesome. Okay. Well, perfect. I'm happy to dig into any of these topics, or we can add to this list. I am also happy to call it. Is anyone particularly passionate about any of the things on this list, like security processes, coding standards? I'm sure we all are passionate about coding standards, just. Okay. Then I will make sure that the link for this winds up in the meeting notes, so that if you do have lingering thoughts that come up later, feel free to add asynchronously. Otherwise, I think I will stop sharing, and we can end this meeting a little early, unless anybody has anything else they'd like to bring up. I can also just stop recording and we can chat for a little bit. Awesome.
Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks for leading the meeting today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was going to say one thing that was just
Let me-
social. So after recording.
Okay, let me stop.